Hello everybody. Welcome back for another video. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all doing great. Hope you're all doing absolutely fantastic. Don't forget to subscribe if you have not already done so. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. There's a link in the description below. Without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Interesting news day. Nothing too crazy, but I think a lot of the topics are quite fascinating. You'll see as we're actually going over them. And I'm shocked that this is actually popular news. Anytime that something like this happens, people tend to push back against it as opposed to lightly thinking logically in any sort of way. Jack Dorsey is in the news. Jack Dorsey is the former CEO, I think creator, of Twitter. He is, along with Jack Mallers and like two other people, they're like hyper Bitcoin maximalists. So we're not talking about like Michael Saylor level of maximalism. Michael Saylor's only a maximalist because he has a lot of Bitcoin and he wants to create a bank. And we know that because he has a lot of Bitcoin and said that he wants to create a bank. He thinks that people who don't like banks holding their crypto are completely insane. So when you talk about like pure form, like purity, actual like Bitcoin maximalists believing that like Bitcoin is for the people, Bitcoin will stop people from being in debt, Bitcoin will get us away from the old system, it's Jack Dorsey. Jack Dorsey, CEO of Block and former CEO of Twitter, has cautioned that Bitcoin may risk losing its relevance if it remains solely a store of value. This might, how do I say it this way? A lot of people who keep getting into the Bitcoin space have no idea what Bitcoin is. I want to say 80% of people in the market are only here because they think that Bitcoin is like a way for them to make fast money. If you've been here the last couple of months, you know fast money is not what Bitcoin does. But over the long term, the long term, Bitcoin is poised to hit several $million per coin. People think it's going to $44 million per coin. And then you have the illustrious $100 million per Bitcoin. The point of Bitcoin is to actually be used. This is why we actually saw a number of years ago a lot of internal fighting, because the main people who run Blockstream, who they don't control Bitcoin's code, but they work with the developers on it. They don't really want to actually upgrade Bitcoin. And there's one gigantic reason. The idea has to essentially do with like digital purity. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like that kind of thing. The problem is that Bitcoin cannot keep up with traditional legacy systems. So Bitcoin currently does 3 to 5 transactions per second. There's always a huge amount of strife or anger or discussions when anyone ever mentions any kind of a layer 2 solution for Bitcoin. Bitcoin, like maximalists, like some of them don't believe that Lightning is like a viable solution. The problem is that no one proposes anything else. So what we've kind of fallen into from the last 15 years is this idea of Bitcoin being used to buy cars, to buy food. Remember the whole thing to buy coffee? People thought back then that Bitcoin would make it once Bitcoin became viable enough to be able to have a transaction when you bought a coffee for $1 or $1, however much a coffee is at the local store, like that kind of thing. That shifted into people who just gathering tons of Bitcoin and announcing that Bitcoin is only going to be a store of value. It's going to be digital gold. But the purpose of Bitcoin is actually to use it, to make sure that like it has like hyper amounts of relevancy within the world as an actual usage of a currency. If me and you bought a whole bunch of investments but never actually used them, then the investment essentially has no real value because it's not being used. We're just hoarding it. If we all have some and we're hoarding it in our homes and it's not being used, there's no real usage for it. It's just all future speculation that someone else might want to buy it at a higher price than you bought it for, as opposed to seeing that there are billions of people on the planet actually using that currency. And you don't really have to worry about the price because you know that Bitcoin is relevant and valid in society and in finance. That's what Jack Dorsey is talking about. As once again, he has cautioned that Bitcoin may risk losing relevance as if it remains solely a store of value. Speaking during an interview at Presidio Bitcoin, Dorsey emphasized the necessity for Bitcoin to evolve beyond merely hodling it to ensure its long-term viability, highlighting the importance of Bitcoin's enhancing Bitcoin's utility. The annoyance that I have, and once again, this is going to sound mean, but I really don't care. A lot of people constantly write things, or I remember mentioning before a couple of years ago, the first time that I wanted like billions of people to be in Bitcoin, not for its price to rise, but for them to have some level of economic freedom. You don't understand because of where you were actually born. You always have had access to a bank account, even since you were a child. You had access to all these other things, but there are billions of people on the planet who don't. So when you talk about what Bitcoin is actually for, and then we get news of the ETF issuers, the people who already own the world, owning nearly 2 million Bitcoin, MicroStrategy trying to get 1 million Bitcoin. It damages the entire system, but it's not a conversation that people want to have because people are so obsessed with Bitcoin's price going up and then making tons of money. The problem is that Bitcoin won't go up if people aren't actually using it. You know, the old saying, I wish I had all the money in the world. Do you know the value of money if you hold everything? The value is zero because people aren't using it. The US dollar has value even if the value has decreased. Has value because people use it all over the world. The euro has value because you have 1 billion people using the euro every single day. You need people to actually utilize Bitcoin beyond the United States having 1 million, MicroStrategy having 1 million, the ETFs holding 3 million, MetaPlanet holding 1% of all Bitcoin, these kinds of things. But there's no transactions happening. You can't just have people trading it back and forth. But once again, this is the conversation that people don't actually want to have. One side doesn't care. You don't understand that Bitcoin is or could be literal economic and financial freedom for everyone on the planet. And then the other side, you have the people who are actively trying not to update or upgrade Bitcoin. Do you remember this was sometime? Yeah, this was last year, definitely last year. Around January, there was a developer who figured out a way to make NFTs on Bitcoin. For those of you who weren't here, he called them inscriptions. It's basically like you're inscribing something directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain that is in essence immutable, that anyone can see, anyone can use, anyone can interact with without having to need permission. That's the point of a decentralized network. And he was like, yeah, I created, NFTs that can basically last forever. You know, the people who had a problem with it, it is not Jack Dorsey, but it's like the people at the very top of Bitcoin who didn't want that. They thought it was nonsense. Bitcoin is only meant to be bought and then held as a store of value. The idea of anything else on the network taking up transaction space was like a huge thing because then people would be forced to actually upgrade Bitcoin or rely on layer 2 solutions to make sure that transactions go a lot quicker through the actual network. It became a huge topic of discussion. There was another thing. It was inscriptions and something else. Someone made something else on top of, directly on top of Bitcoin, and people were furious that it was even a thing. And it's like, no, we need all of these things. If you want Bitcoin to succeed, artists need to be able to make art on top of Bitcoin. We need to be able to have websites on top of this thing. We're not living in the 1920s anymore. The idea of something just having one kind of functionality doesn't exist. It's the same when you hear about all these, remember all the years ago, I kept on saying all these coins were copying off of each other because they all wanted ICOs. They all wanted STOs. They all wanted to be able to create NFTs. They all wanted DeFi. They all wanted decentralized exchanges. They all wanted, the list kept on going. It's because that's how the world is now. When you pick up your phone, you're not just making phone calls. It has 800 other functions. You can constantly download more onto it that give it extra functions. I think the age of Bitcoin just being Bitcoin is completely gone. The idea of Bitcoin actually being used, that was the whole point of Pizza Day. Like the first major transaction that we had on record for something for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's meant to be used. If we actually had more people not only in the market but actually using it, we'd have a higher price because other metrics would also show that as well. Our metrics show how many people are mining, how high this thing is, how many people new enter the space every day, how many people are buying, how many people are taking it off of crypto exchanges. If another one of our metrics showed that there were 2 to 3 billion people on the planet who relied on Bitcoin every single day, they stopped using the US dollar, they stopped using the ruble, they stopped using the yen, and they were literally just using Bitcoin. This is how you get to $1 million easily because it has so much significance and relevance that people actually need it and are using it. It's a weird topic, and yeah, I don't think we're ever going to have any kind of real resolution for it. Because so many people are so adamant that Bitcoin should only ever do 3 to 5 transactions per second. One of the ideas, for those of you who don't know, is that if people decided to use the Lightning Network, that it would only be like normal people. So one of the big ideas for all of this from Blockstream and what have you is that if you are rich and you wanted to send a large amount of money, then you would use the Bitcoin blockchain for that transaction. If you wanted to send something for like 50 cents, $1, or whatever, you would have to use another layer. But even then, they don't even give a lot of attention to building out those layers. Remember when we heard the New York Stock Exchange, this was 2018, the New York Stock Exchange was talking about adopting the Lightning Network and all these other companies and institutions. And who was it? What company did it? It might have been the New York Stock Exchange. Like remember that graph? It was Nordstrom, it was Starbucks, all those years ago talking about the Lightning Network, and then nothing came from it. Nothing actually ended up popping up where it talked about like the actual like relevance of Lightning or building up. Like we had Lightning news a year ago, and that was it. How often do we get news about other crappy coins, but we don't get like the actual payment solution that would allow people around the planet to actively be able to use Bitcoin and have a 1 cent transaction fee? He said, I think it fails through irrelevance. If it just ends up being a store of value and nothing more, I don't think it gains relevance at all. I think it has to be payments for it to be relevant on the everyday, end quote. Dorsey emphasized that for a Bitcoin to succeed long-term, it needs to transition into a practical payment system used in daily transactions. Without this evolution, he believes Bitcoin could become something people, and I quote, kind of buy and forget and only use in emergency situations, which makes no sense. It needs to be actually used as a currency. Otherwise, Bitcoin has no purpose. This is why, and I know some people are going to suck their teeth here, this is why a lot of the XRP Ripple news ends up being exciting when they're saying that they're like actually working with banks, when they're integrating their stablecoin, when all these things are happening and working on top of the actual XRP blockchain is being used for payments. XRP is being used for remittances across the planet, like where they have lower railways, if you will, for payments. Like that's what makes it exciting. We need companies, but the problem is Bitcoin's volatility. This is always usually like the actual topic at hand. The transactions are slow. Sometimes it takes like 20 to 25 to 28 minutes for the transaction to actually finalize on the blockchain. We need something a lot faster because once we have like full Lightning, I don't know why Lightning is in 10x where it is now. And that also shouldn't even be the main solution. Why Lightning is in 10x as big as it currently is right now, and why we don't have these companies like actually using it on a daily basis for remittances. It's the oddest thing. And I think there's only a couple of apps. I think it's the Strike app, Strike or Stripe. I don't know why they chose such similar names, but one of them actually does use Lightning. And like it's a godsend. It's kind of, if you ever watch any of those documentaries where they show like El Salvador and people like transacting in Bitcoin, they're using Lightning. It takes seconds. They have a 1 cent transaction fee. And it was helping all these people in these villages who would otherwise maybe not have had any money coming to them. But as a novelty, people go there like, I want to spend my Bitcoin on this mango or whatever this thing that I'm actually buying in this area. Yeah, the tech entrepreneur further pointed to emerging circular economies in regions outside of the West as evidence of Bitcoin's potential. He said, you get down to Central America, South America, Africa, people are using Bitcoin to buy coffee, to buy dinner, to pay vendors. There's tiny little circular economies happening, and they're not talking about the price because you shouldn't have to. When you buy something, you don't talk about the US dollar's price as you're purchasing it. Did you see that the dollar fell 0.5% against the euro today? Like, no, it's completely irrelevant. And there's so many people like packing themselves into this market, not wanting to understand what all of this is for. How can you live your life and understand that you are being lied to by the current system? You get into Bitcoin and you know that it's a literal way for you to gain economic freedom, to escape the old system, to not have to worry about a bank taking your money, and you don't care. Like, you are so stuck with this idea of let me profit, let me cash out so I can put my money back into a bank, and heaven forbid should that bank crash or collapse or steal your money. That's why I thought it was so important years ago, and we don't hear a gosh darn thing about this anymore. I thought it was so interesting that years ago, Cardano was talking about doing business and like setting up shop and working within, I know Africa is a continent, I got it, but within Africa and within Latin America. That's incredibly important. You have billions of people who are literally unbanked. You know, in many countries in Africa, they use phone credit as money. It sounds like a joke. It's not. They will get phone credit put onto their phone, and as they will send it to each other as a way of transacting. You know what these countries are now? Like a lot of these like cities and towns and provinces, they're actually using Bitcoin. They're using Satoshis. This is what it's for. And then everyone else doesn't really care because, once again, you are in a privileged position which people don't want to hear, and you don't understand what the actual use case of Bitcoin is. You're buying it and hoarding it, hoping at some point that some government, but it's like, no, like this need, like Bitcoin should be 8 times as large as it actually is. And I mean from price, from network, from actual usage, from community, from payments. But so much of it is just being shrunk down to this idea of, well, at some point in the future in 2055, the United States will have 1 million Bitcoin, and then they're going to be like issuing new US dollars based off of the amount of Bitcoin that they have. So then we'll have a Bitcoin gold standard, but then no one will be using Bitcoin. No, it won't be relevant. It won't actually be a currency. It won't be used for anything except for sitting. Listen, think of the idea of like Fort Knox or like some place that has a huge amount of gold just sitting there. Now imagine just a USB sitting in someone's drawer that has 1 million Bitcoin. You go, yeah, that's what they're printing money for. We don't need new money printed. We have a system right now. It's Bitcoin. Even crazier is that if everyone decides, you can add additional decimal places to Bitcoin because it has 100 million spaces. And 1 Bitcoin is worth 100 million Satoshis. We have enough for everyone on the planet, but we won't if these companies continue to buy. And I know that people don't care about that because they want these companies to buy so that the price goes up so that they can swap back into the US dollar and continue losing value on their investments. Such a weird circle. His comments come as Bitcoin maximalists continue to be criticized for their rigid stance against innovation beyond the original Bitcoin protocol, and their reluctance to embrace layer 2 solutions that could enhance Bitcoin's utility. Dorsey challenged maximalist thinking by expressing that the community can do better than Lightning, referring to the Lightning Network, a popular second layer solution designed to enable faster Bitcoin transactions. He said, I don't think we just want to settle with having one layer 2. I think we need to experiment a lot more and have different alternatives. Yeah, it's, I'll say it this way. I know that Bitcoin is going to succeed, but Bitcoin shouldn't just succeed for rich people. That's literally like my comment. We know that Bitcoin's going to do well. But we need more people actually in the space who understand and want to understand. But it's the same exact thing with long-term growth and generational wealth, people really just don't care. You would assume, I assumed for a number of years, that everyone getting into Bitcoin actually cared, or in some sort of fashion, like wanted more from their life than what they currently have. No, a lot of people don't actually care. So I hope that, and we never get news. We never get news like this. So I hope that we continue to see some kind of continuation of expansion across Latin America, across Africa, across Southeast Asia, because there will be some kind of a reckoning. There will be a situation where we end up seeing that all the Bitcoin is held by just these institutions. Only 100 million people are using it, when the goal for a lot of people, you've heard these companies say it, they want 1 billion people using Bitcoin. And it's like, how are we ever going to do that if we can't get Lightning going? Lightning was proposed back in 2016, 2017, 2018. If all that time has passed and no one's still using Lightning, what is Bitcoin supposed to do? Anyway, that's the Jack Dorsey news. I was surprised to see this news popping up on multiple websites, because anytime that someone says anything real about crypto and the space and what has to happen, people just kind of turn the other way. That's the Jack Dorsey news. And yeah, let's move on. Also in popular news that I think was supposed to be huge, a new report from South Korea's government Public Ethics Committee has revealed that 1 in 5 officials holds crypto. It says reflecting the increasing penetration is a crazy word. It says reflecting the increasing penetration of digital assets in state institutions. No, these people have had this crypto for a very long time. There's this delusion that people have in crypto that they don't think that governments or institutions or policymakers or people in these things are actually, or public officials are actually holding crypto. You're not special. You're not magical. You're not the only person who knows about Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP. These people also know. Why do you think they have such favorable rules and regulations in many different countries? It's because these people are also holding crypto. We had that a couple of years ago. I forgot what country it was. It was somewhere in Eastern Europe, where they were asking officials who work in public office, do you hold crypto? And I think more than half of them and had crypto, and one of them had several 30, 40, $50 million in Bitcoin, and people were like, what? But he works in the government. How's that possible? They're humans. You know that they know all these things usually before we do. These are the people who are actually in contact with BlackRock. It's government officials who get to actually call and text them and be like, hey, we have, some stuff going on. Tell us where to put our money. What's happening with the economy? What's going on? As of 2025, 411 out of 2,047 officials have declared crypto holdings, amounting to a combined value of $9.8 million US. The Ethics Committee at the end of March report's 27th of March report was published by local media outlet Hunhwa and represents the most detailed breakdown yet of crypto asset ownership within South Korea's public officials. This is not surprising. This is happening everywhere. This is what I keep talking about when we have this delusion that only BlackRock is buying Bitcoin or only MicroStrategy. No, it's literally everywhere. It's all over the place. That's what when I talk about the actual Bitcoin on crypto exchanges and people thinking that it's all liquid. You can't be that delusional and think that no, these people have some of their Bitcoin on there. These people probably have 50, 60, 70 Bitcoin that they have in multiple different wallets, and they have that 50 on Coinbase, 50 somewhere else. All those coins aren't liquid. They're not for everyone to actually buy. We know that it's such a weird. So the news basically is that the officials in South Korea are holding large amounts of crypto. And I wonder exactly how far this goes and how many of them were actually telling the truth and not being cropto. No, sorry, I don't have any of that. What other government officials were not actually asked as well? There's more than 2,047 people working in the South Korean government across the board. What about everyone else who's higher up in ranks? How much crypto do they have? Yeah, this also popped up a lot as well, and I was once again a little bit shocked because we normally never, and you'd see kind of news like this, and when we end up seeing it, it ends up being this kind of well, what? But how's that possible? They work for the government. There was also one of the things, apparently, I think one of them has $1 million worth of XRP. It says it's somewhere around here. But yeah, completely unsurprising. This is just how things are. They're buying up all of it, and they have been doing it for a very long time. I just always hope that people are paying attention, and I mean really learning and paying attention and trying to also, I shouldn't have to keep saying this. I saw a video on YouTube, and I was like, yeah, I'm glad someone made it. They were talking about having a savings plan, because a lot of people don't have savings. They don't have any money set aside. And I mentioned to all of you before, for the last 2 years, to make a savings account and to have some sort of savings and to put money away and to sell things in your house that you don't need. Because if you haven't been seeing in the news, a lot of layoffs are happening, and they're going to continue to accelerate. And a lot of people wait until the last moment to do something, and then they end up panicking and wonder why it didn't work out that way. Just a random thought. I had to throw it out there because I'm getting way too many videos. I'm getting way too many comments. I'm getting way too many things online. I'm getting way too many videos on YouTube about people who are losing their jobs and people who don't have not even retirement savings, who have absolutely nothing. I don't know if I told you all, a friend of a friend works at like this really big company. I can't say which company, but it's one of these anyway, really big company. He's been working there for a couple of years. And they announced like 3 or 4 weeks ago that they were doing layoffs. And no, it wasn't layoffs. It was marketed as downsizing. So some people might lose some hours, or some people might not have the contracts that they thought that they were going to get, or whatever the case might have been. He said he walked into work on a Monday and he saw that like this one guy was like putting his stuff away into a box. That guy had been working at this company for 25 years. Once again, this man had been working at this place, almost said the name, for 25 years. This guy had no idea. He went home on a Friday, fell asleep, enjoyed his weekend, and when he got to work on Monday, he was told after 25 years without warning, hey, bud, you don't work here anymore. And as I've been learning quite quickly, a lot of people rest very heavily on their 401ks and some other type of thing that is going through their job and have no actual savings. But I know. I just felt someone's blood run cold because, I'm talking to you. They have no money saved. They think that they're going to get a proper pension. If you haven't seen the actual like pension crisis and how much less people are going to actually have as people live longer and there's more people on the planet and more people in your country, that money has to go a lot further. It has to be extended far further to help other people who are also getting older as we have a rapidly aging population. So a lot of people think that when they get older, they're going to have a very hefty retirement savings thing. Nope, that money is actually going to be spread a lot thinner amongst you and other people, because it's you. Here's the crazy part. A lot of people, and this is what I thought as well when I was younger. You assume that the money that you're putting away into your 401k or your retirement account or all these other kinds of, schemes, what have you, that money goes directly to you. No, what you're doing is you're paying monthly into a gigantic pot, and then someone's taking money out of that pot and sprinkling it onto the people who've already retired. So the misconception is that the money that you're putting away or is taken from you into these government retirement accounts or through your job is like just for, that's not at all how it works. You have to have your own money. You also have to have your own savings account. I don't know why that's something that needs to be said, or something that is like controversial, or something that just people just aren't doing. How do you not have savings? I sincerely don't get it. So once again, I'm seeing a gigantic uptick because for those of you who haven't seen it, there are still rumors and expectations and possibilities that by 2026, there will be a major recession and a lot of people will be losing jobs. So if you're hearing this right now, start a savings account. If you have a savings account, put more money into it. Sell stuff in your house that you don't need, that you don't want. It's okay if 1 month you don't, treat yourself to that thing that you don't need, and that money also goes into the savings account. Just throwing it out there because people like to not pay attention and just assume that like the news isn't relevant to them until it actually is. Right. I think that's going to do it for this video. I do hope that you've all enjoyed. I do hope you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Wherever the heck you might be, I do hope it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting, and I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.